This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 106.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. And Jonathan and I thought it'd be a little fun to reminisce with the veterinary students going back to school here a week or two ago, to reminisce on our first year in veterinary school.
That is correct. So if we think back, we're not that old that we can't remember back to our first year of vet school, but it's getting more muddy by the year.
I would say speak for yourself, because I was sitting here trying to think and the years have really blended together. And I was like, was that first year or second year or third year? When did that happen?
That's it. Well, if you look at it and the kind of the process of coming up with this podcast topic was that I was at the UCVM, which is the University of Calgary Veterinary Medicine's white coat ceremony on Monday night. And we were there as council member with the ABVMA and the CVMA, who jointly puts it on. And I'm looking at all these students going through and going, wow, they're half my age, not quite, but pretty close in some instances. And everybody is so excited, energetic. And as opposed to our white coat ceremonies, which we're going to talk a little bit more, this was a much more formal setup.
Interesting. I have not been to a white coat since mine, I think. And then seeing all the posts online on Instagram, mostly, it is pretty fun because it's just such a, like you said, happy and energetic time. I'm seeing all the photos of the WCVM white coat in front, the classic, like either at the long, tall ramp going in or in front of the signage. So definitely an exciting time. And congratulations, all the first year students. Exciting times ahead.
What a difference. So for these students, and this is exciting for both people that have been in vet med for a while and first year students, this is a big deal. There was formal dresses, there was parents, grandparents, flowers, you name it at this event, it was there. And it was really well put together. And you just, again, see that bubbly enthusiasm. And day one, so they had the white coat ceremony on day one. I don't recall whether we did it on day one or not, but I know for a fact my parents weren't invited. It was a pretty short ceremony. My wife actually remembers it better than me. I actually don't remember the ceremony. I remember putting on the white coat, having the picture in front, and then we went and had a party. That's what I remember.
I'm just thinking on the fly here. A few years, unfortunately, missed out on their white coat with everything being shut down. So I don't know, in Calgary, was this a joint one? Did they do a white coat for multiple years, or this was only incoming class?
No, I was part of the one last year as well, too. And the last year's version was all online. So unfortunately for those students, they received their white coats and they had a virtual session where everybody was one by one shown on the screen. Nothing near what the excitement and enthusiasm was from earlier this week.
Yeah. And it's funny, just you and I were chatting here, and we talk about this all the time, the relationships that form in veterinary medicine and going to school with that same cohort for 4 years, going through all the same classes and exams and experiences. It just being in person, you can't replicate that. And for the incoming year, like, get excited, because this is the start of you beginning to build lifelong relationships.
Absolutely. They put all of us council members in different tables, and at my table I had a boyfriend girlfriend that she had gone to school in Vancouver and then coming back as a resident of Alberta, and then another one that was from a farming community in north central Alberta. And speaking about the competition's over, taking the time to recognize that you've made it, you're in, The school's job, the government's job, your job is to make it through the next 4 years. And you do that with your partners in crime, which is your colleagues, whether it's first, second, third, or fourth. And that's what makes it fun. And that's what makes it actually sustainable if you think of the challenges that are the next 4 years. And you could just see them kind of looking at me. Yeah, here's an old guy telling us what to do. I'm going, this is the real. This is what makes it worthwhile, is the work hard, play hard, in my one person's opinion. And I was thinking about that in pre-setup for our call today, is going, wow, imagine it didn't happen that way. Imagine we didn't know the colleagues as well as we do, or have had those awesome experiences, both good and bad, first year, second, third, and fourth. Where would we be today? And I'd say it would be a lot less of an enjoyable life without it. And I still chat with colleagues on a day-to-day basis. Got a phone call from a good buddy yesterday, chatting on business things and struggles that we all have. And God, thank God for that.
Yeah. Some of the best friendships, obviously. I mean, here you and I are not even from the same year, but however, 2 decades later or whatever it is, plugging away.
That's exactly it, right? If you think about it, we weren't even in the same class.
Yeah.
So that just shows. Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's I guess dive in. Any stories that jump out at you from your first year in veterinary medicine, or the white coat ceremony,
or that first couple of weeks in? I think it was, my remembrance is that it was a pretty big rush. That first couple of weeks in vet school, taking it all in, both from an academic standpoint, acknowledging that, wow, there is a lot of material coming at us very quickly, and material that specifically, we're chatting pre-recording, histo, biochem, and then I'll let you go into the anatomy story, but there's a lot coming at you. And I remember one of the stories is being in the histo lab, where you have the microscopes in front of you and you're looking at different cell types, and you're just getting into it. And I remember the first few weeks of people, raising their hands and talking about, oh, this is a Heinz body, or, oh, this is a nucleated immature white blood cell count. And I'm looking at the microscope going, I have no clue what they are talking about. I see cells in front of me. What did I miss in my reading or pre-reading, or what reading did I not do, that this is still coming through a blur? And I do remember it taking a while before I got a sense of calm and recognizing, okay, I'm going to make this through first year. This is a lot of material. Just get at it and go at it. And it's all right if I don't know it day one.
Yeah. Well, you were miles ahead of me. I think, I'm trying to remember, I think it took me 3 weeks to be able to look properly through a microscope, like without seeing a giant black circle on one half, or closing one eye, or not like straining your eyes so hard that you're exhausted in like 2 minutes. So yeah, it took me like 3 weeks just to see something, even though I didn't know what it was. But I mean, I would agree for students, take the first few weeks in, they do feel overwhelming. For me, the stories that jumped out, I remember first day, like day one, into the anatomy lab, they're like, grab a partner, grab a cadaver dog, put it on a table, and get going. And I was like, what? Like thinking like, oh, this is orientation, we're just going to kind of walk around. And they're like, no, like this is where you got to get to today. Like get that dog, like, take the first layer of skin off and start looking at stuff. And I was like, what is going on here? Like just right into it. So I think Chris Biederbeck, he was my anatomy cadaver dog partner. And then, I mean, that person, I don't know if things have changed how they do the cadavers now, but you spend a lot of time with that person hunched over a cadaver
for months and months of trying to keep that animal intact and not smelling too badly. And I think it's similar, except for we just did a tour of UCVM, and their models, one, are so much better than what we had. Two, there's a lot of models compared to us. We just had, a few plasticine setups at that time. They have full functioning models with blood running through them and all the rest of it, of which, we didn't have at that time. I think secondly, on that first time with the anatomy, is you don't recognize how much time you're going to be spending with those individuals. Like it's hours and hours and hours. And getting that set up properly.
I'm gonna throw a tangent in here, Jonathan, just because I'm in control of this episode, so I get to do that.
It's yours.
So, yeah. So I've been I'm helping harvest on the combine, and I've been binging Alex Hormozi who is I guess a social media influencer, dynamite. If I highly recommend anyone follow him. One of the things I recently heard him say is the frame of the 85-year-old. And so he's a male, so he calls it the frame of the 85-year-old grandfather, could be grandmother, could be anyone. And what he talks about is every day picturing yourself at 85 years old, looking back on a photograph of that day. So for current vet students, imagine yourself at 85 holding a photo. There, I'm dating myself because who prints photos anymore? It's all digital. But looking at a photo of yourself and your classmates at that white coat ceremony, right? And feeling that gratitude that you're going to look back and be like, wow, I remember how excited I was in veterinary school. That was a great time. And so that frame, I mean, when I heard that, I was like, wow, what a way to look at everything.
I'm going to take that a next step and say there's an app where you can actually do it in 2022, and it's called the 1 Second Everyday app. And I'm actually going to download it because it was in another podcast episode where instead of printing it out old school, you take 1 second frame, reel, video, etc., and then it will record it for you over time. And wouldn't that be something? And the individual that was speaking on this podcast, actually, it was not a positive one in terms of the 1 second frame that was his most impactful emotional. It was just looking at a frame of bricks on a wall and all the emotion that was behind that due to the fact that a close family member had just been diagnosed with an inoperable cancer and all the emotion that came up with that. But then the flip side of that was all of the family coming to go through it. And he said that of all the thousands and thousands of 1 second frames. So for us in vet school, those 1 seconds, they sure add up quickly. And darn it, if you can make it through activities and stories and times and colleagues and friends, they're good.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some non-academic, off the books, fun stories, the real relationship building in veterinary school. Because I would say that's where I really bonded with people, is where you get outside the classroom doing whatever you're up to. So, and anything that jumped out for you?
Well, in first year, again, everything's coming at you. And I think there is still the connection where there's first, fourth year buddies in a lot of schools, or first and third year, whichever way it sets up for. For me, that was an intro into what it looked like. Maybe was it first, third year or first, fourth year? I can't even remember.
I feel like it was first, fourth year, but who knows?
Yeah, either way, I remember that being a good connection point. Just if I had questions, etc., I'd go to my third or fourth year buddy, and it's bad that I don't even remember. I could get things figured out. But otherwise, it was all of us in a group going, where do we go? What does this look like? And the in-between classes, going for coffees. And then afterwards, in that first couple of months, just getting to know each other. And again, I think we had a different setup in Saskatoon where we all lived pretty close within, 15 minutes of each other. And it's such a student town that we ended up spending a lot of time together. And speaking with the UCVM students this week, they're in Calgary. They're in a city that's 1.5 million people, and they're separated by 30 to 45 minutes based on the certain situations for renting properties these days. And I think that affords a different student experience compared to us, because we spent a lot of time at each other's homes, in each other's condos, sitting around, partying, studying, just, shooting the breeze on what was going on the day to day. I think that was really important for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say, I'm going to go a little bit different direction with, the bonding experience. For me, unquestionably, the thing that highlighted my first year was the pranks. We had a group of people in our class that was not afraid to kind of push the envelope in terms of what was acceptable for pranks inside the veterinary school. So the ones that jump out, and I think these are first year, it might have blended with second year. There was always a little bit of a rivalry first, fourth year. So the first and second year shared a locker room, third and fourth year share a locker room. And I remember prank number one that we pulled to kind of say, hey, we're here, was we had this idea that we were going to fill their whole locker room with popcorn, like literally fill it, like to the roof. And I remember I bought all these popcorn machines and was popping popcorn all over my house. And I did a little bit of math on it, and I was like, oh my, like this is going to take us months and it's going to cost a lot of money. And I remember I even drove to movie theaters being like, hey, can we get your spare popcorn? That was a no-go. So Victor in our class kind of saved the day, and we pivoted from a prank popcorn sale to a prank baler twine sale. So Victor lived a few hours away, and he literally showed up with their farm like tandem truck full of used baler twine, because he grew up on a ranch. And so they, when you cut a bale, they would spool the twine up and throw it in this shed or this pile. And so he loaded all that up, brought it in. And I remember under the cloak of darkness, we had it all planned. And I don't know how many of us showed up, but we literally filled their locker room like to the roof. And those are tall ceilings with baler twine. Oh, and then we built these like chute systems where when they open the door, they'd get covered in like popcorn and all this sort of stuff. So that kicked it off. And then I think
did you guys get in trouble for that one yet? Or was that one pretty G-rated?
This one was acceptable. I think we put up flyers too, like baler twine sale, like made it like a fundraiser for the fourth years and put up flyers around the school. And they were good sports on that. I don't know where that where did they put all that baler twine? I don't know, but you would see little spools of baler twine all over the campus, like for the next while as they were trying to clean it up. So that kind of kicked things off. And then we escalated again, and we turned their locker room. This is probably a few months later, into a swamp. So we kind of barricaded the doors. And then there was tiles that go like, whatever, 6 or so inches up the wall. So we're not wrecking anything, but we filled it with water to that point. Someone I remember went and cut down like cattails, like legit. We had frogs in there. Like we literally turned it into a swamp. That one got us in a little bit of trouble. That was maybe just a little bit too far, but I remember, I think it was maybe the associate dean coming down, pretty hot, pretty red. And, we were all in 2302 for our first class. And then all of a sudden it was like, basically like, you guys better get that cleaned up immediately. And we were all sitting there being like, well, how do you know it was us?
Meanwhile, the little walk up the stairs to get over there.
Yeah. So
do it.
That one backfired because I think we ended up cleaning it up. And then favorite, or sorry, go ahead. Well, and then there was obviously, we expected some retaliation at various points. And I had a little bit of a bullseye on my back, and I had prepped all my roommates, and I was like, the doors are locked. No one and we had a lot of people living in our house. So it was not uncommon. Like people are coming and going, and it's like, you may or may not know them, but they're buddies with someone. And I had prepped people like, you don't let anyone in. Like they're coming for me. I know they're coming for me. Like these doors stay locked. And I was showering one morning down in the basement, and I hear a knock on the door, and I could just tell just by like how aggressive the knock was. And I was like, oh no. And like, sure enough, it was a group of them. And I mean, they're very friendly. Like it's not like I'm getting a bag over my head and hauled out. And luckily they let me put some clothes on, hauled me out to the vehicle. They bound my hands. I think zip tied my hands together, but not my feet. And then like jumped in the truck, and it was all like, we're laughing.
Like, good. And this is what, 8 o'clock in the morning on a school day, or what was it?
Because it would be like, I don't remember the day of the week. It was just a weekday before school. So probably like 7-ish or so. But I was the first stop. And so then they were off to pick up another classmate, Josh Lindenbach. And so I'm just riding around for this adventure, and they go to his house because they know where he lives, but they all leave the vehicle. And I was sitting there being like, they're not actually going to leave me alone. And it crossed my mind. I was like, I'm stealing their vehicle. But I was like, my hands are tied together. I was like, that's not safe. But they left the keys in. And I remember they walked to the door, and then I could see, like, I'm just waiting till they're out of sight. And one of them looks back, and I was like, shit, like they've clued in that it's not a good idea to leave me in the vehicle. And he comes running back, and he takes the keys out of the ignition, and he's like, better not leave you with these. And I was like, oh no, better not. Like, and then he leaves again. And I was like, this is unbelievable. I was like, here's my chance. And so I jump out of the vehicle as soon as they're out of sight, and I am like gone, because they didn't zip tie my feet. And so I don't know if anyone's ever seen the movie Superbad, like when that dude gets out of the back of the cop car, he is just a lightning bolt. Like, so I'm running, and like, I'm only in like sweatpants and stuff. Cause like they pulled me from the shower. They're like, throw these clothes on. Like I'm not like dressed up or whatever. And I just running down back alleys, and once they notice I'm gone, I can see them in their red truck. Like they're looking for me. Cause they're like, I couldn't have gotten far. I'm zip tied. And so I remember knocking on someone's house, very bizarre. And like, he's like, what's going on here? Opens it with like one of those, the chain. So like it only can open so far. And I was like, I'm zip tied. I was like, you got to cut me free. And he was like, and then I could realize, I was like, this sounds horrible. And I was like, I'm a university student. Like, this is just part of a prank. Like, it's all good. And he's like, oh, okay. And he opens the door right away. He's like, I remember those days. And like jumped into his house. I was like, he cuts me free. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm in vet school. This is just sort of, first year, fourth year stuff. And he was like laughing. He's like, oh yeah. Call my roommate. He comes and picks me up. So get ready for class. And I head back to vet college. And I was like, well, I'm not going in like any of the front doors because like
they'll be there.
They'll be like, I'm going to get grabbed. So I go in all these back doors. And I remember like going through by offices, like administrator offices, and they're like, can we help you? Like, and I, cause I'm like sneaking around corners and like, I look really guilty. And I was like, oh, I'm in first year, but there's like, they're trying to kidnap me. And they start laughing. They're like, is that going on again? And I was like, yeah. And so get to 2302, cause that's where we always start our day. And poor Josh Lindenbach didn't fare as well as me. So he was taped down to a chair at the bottom. And that lecture theater is set up on the bottom. Like, I don't know if they can bring animals in, but like you can hose it down. So he's soaked. It was basically like a tar and feathering type situation. But I escaped. I did not get tarred and feathered. And that was near the end of first year. And so I remember I was on like high alert. Like I was like, you guys will never catch me. Like I'm covering my tracks. I'm not taking the same way to school. Like, so that was one of my favorite memories of first year by far.
You can't beat that. That's such a good story, Mike.
Yeah.
And my only hope is that the pendulum hasn't swung so far the other way now that students can't have experiences like that, because that was G-rated-ish. There's always that sense of you have to be careful, no doubt about it. And things have changed and times have changed. But the fun experiences that we had in year one set us up, I think, for success, not only for the rest of vet school, but then for life in terms of with colleagues and relationships. And those types of experiences, those are the things you remember for the rest of your life. No offense to the anatomy labs, but you're going to forget 3/4 of that. And you don't forget ever the pranks and the fun and the social that goes with.
Oh man. And I honestly, for our like class of 2008, like that's just first year. Going into like second, third, fourth year, our class really bonded around skits. So I don't know if you remember.
Yep. Skits were huge.
You had
great.
Well, I mean,
great people.
I played a minor role, but like there was some people in our class. Aaron Hughes jumps out that just took the lead, and like, I mean, he was so far ahead of his time in terms of like video production. His skits were legendary. Like, and our class really bonded around them. I remember, I think we did like Michael Jackson Thriller.
Like, yeah, I remember that with Nathan Bernadette. Like, so good. You guys were on.
Yeah, like full, like, and that's like almost the entire class participating. Like, we're talking a cast of like 50 to 70 people, in full costume. Like, that is where relationship.
Same thing with Monster Mash with a couple of, I was a side party to it, one of the most, but that brought people together, and we practiced those for weeks.
Man, I remember, I don't know what year we're on now, but my basement turned into a practice facility for our little like 2008 band. I wasn't part of the band, but I had a basement, and there was 5 or 6 guys, drums, guitar, whatever, practicing, and then they would play live at
Kevin. Wasn't Kevin? He could play pretty well, if I remember correctly, in your year.
Yeah, there was like Kevin, Alistair, Josh Lawrence, I think maybe Rob Lawrence. I don't remember everyone who was in those bands, and I was like, that's the stuff. Like, that's where the relationships get formed.
That is the stuff. So for all those that have no idea who we're talking about in terms of people, doesn't matter, because you're going to form your own groups.
Yeah. Take
advantage of that. Spend the time. Who cares if you're up till 2-3 a.m.? Doesn't matter.
I would also even maybe push it a little further with a challenge. And if that stuff is not happening, and I mean, make it your own. You don't gotta go try fill a locker room full of popcorn just because I thought that was a funny idea. Come up with whatever you want. Doesn't have to be a prank. It can be anything you want, but be the leader on it. Like, I hear people talk about intentionally creating magical moments, right? Because you don't know when they're going to happen, but you can put yourself in a situation where they're more likely to happen.
And people want to be a part of it. And I saw that in the UCVM grad. You're going to have those extroverts, you're going to have those introverts. I remember this so much, that the introverts and sometimes have some social awkwardness, or they're just not comfortable taking that first step. But if you wrap them in and bring them with you in whatever prank or fun scenario that's there, you have literally just created a friend for life. And they want to be a part of it. So just like you said, be the leader on it. Feel a little uncomfortable for 30 seconds, a minute. Who cares? Because the fun, the joy, the relationships that come as a result of it way outlast that uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. So I'm excited now. Like, my energy on this podcast has from start to finish here has totally changed, because I'm just sitting here laughing about everything we got up to. And I'm like, man, I got to call some of these people and like catch up.
Well, I'm thinking about it as you're telling those stories, and I remember us taking 4 wheels off somebody's vehicle, and all of a sudden he couldn't drive, and it was the middle of winter, and I'm going, that was a dumb thing to do, but we did it anyway. I don't remember who it was for. I remember the water fight pranks that aren't even allowed anymore, and that was multi-yeared, and tackling and getting the girls involved and spraying everything that was brand new, and we got shit for that. There's so much. I remember the 5K runs that we'd set up for, I don't know, some type of fundraiser or another, and getting everybody involved and jazzed up for that. And again, just bringing people together. Yeah. Every year in the buff, remember, again, first years, it was the, what could you eat? I don't even remember, like, it was a fundraiser for something, and there was the gross, disgusting, different types of food. And then we were the auction as well too.
Yeah.
In terms of get auctioned away for a certain amount of money, and then you have to go on dates with different people.
I remember our first guest, Kent, waxing his chest. That was a fundraiser, a charity fundraiser of some sort.
That's right. Yep.
So,
I remember a bunch of us shaving our heads for something or another and just making goofs out of ourselves. Yeah.
So
good times. So for those that are in first year, for those hopefully that are a little bit, more aged now, hopefully we brought you some smiles this morning. And vet school is a great time. You work hard. Look, we haven't even talked about academics at all. We made it through. That's the school's job, the government's job. You're smart enough to have gotten in. Now it's time to enjoy it. You have to work hard, without a doubt. It's not easy, but all the other things make it worthwhile.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap, on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly, so be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to theveterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the Veterinary Project Podcast @gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.